Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started because we're on a little bit of a short timeline here. I'm Dr. McCobb. I'm the Assistant Director of the Center for Animals and Public Policy. So welcome to our first Animal Matters series talk for the fall. We do have a couple other talks coming up. Our next talk will be Monday, October 28th, and that's looking at equine behavior. And then we have Dr. Kevin Morris talking about the Pets for Life program and some research that they've done with HSUS, and that'll be November 4th. Both of those are Mondays. So today's talk is also co-sponsored by the Veterinary Disaster Response Course, and I know that they're always looking they're always looking for more members, so if you are interested, you can see Lucy or Natalie. They're always looking for more people to join their student group.
Massive sign up after today.
Yes, massive sign up for that. We're really excited to welcome Dr. Warren Hess here. He is a veterinarian with the AVMA. He's their disaster coordinator and assistant director of the Division of Animal and Public Health. And we just got lucky that he was here for the MVMA Fall CE Conference in Westboro. So he was kind enough to sort of stop here and meet with us this morning and give this talk for you guys today. He does have a hard stop at 12:45 because his next talk in Westboro is at 1:30. So that being said, we probably won't have time for questions. You definitely can send us your questions and we will try to find the answers if we don't get to it today. So as I said, Dr. Hess is Assistant Director of the AVMA's Division of Animal and Public Health and the Disaster Coordinator for AVMA. And in this role, he provides technical and scientific expertise to various AVMA committees, such as the Council on Veterinary Service and the Committee on Disaster and Emergency Issues. He's a Colorado State grad, which we won't hold against him. And prior to coming to the government, he worked in Utah as a private practitioner and then had several elected positions, was head of the Utah VMA, and is nationally recognized for his expertise in disaster response. So we welcome him to Tufts and look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you. We live in an environment of diversity and inclusion, right? So CSU is okay, I hope. Okay, I think both microphones will stay on there. Buckle up your seat belts because we're gonna be flying through some stuff here. We'll see how much we get through, but I'm pleased to be able to come and give you a little bit about my knowledge and experience when it comes to disaster and disease response. It's a common topic that creates a lot of interest, so let's get going with this. One of the first things people frequently ask me is, how did you get involved in all this? And so I want to just give you a 2-minute rundown of my career. So like I said, graduated from CSU in '89. After a couple of years in a clinic practice, I started a house call practice. This is not my vehicle, but I had one that was like it, and ran that for a couple of years. And then I know that's lunchtime, so I apologize, and this is a real trigger warning, so if you don't like gross photos, close your eyes until you hear me say okay. But I had a little incident with this mobile clinic, and it kind of put me out of practice for a while. Had a propane explosion with me inside of it, and that kind of changed the course of my career a little bit. And ended that house call practice because there was no vehicle, there was no vet, and the clientele all had to go elsewhere. Well, some of them stuck around and saw me later on, but most of them had to go elsewhere because it was going to be some time before I got back on my feet. So I got a little experience in continuity of operations for a practice and things to consider about that. I worked, after recovering from that, which took about a year, I practiced again in a clinic practice for a number of years, and then in 2004 went to work for the Utah Department of Agriculture and in their office of the state veterinarian there. A year later, Katrina happened, 2005, August 2005. You'll frequently hear that storm as being a landmark storm because it changed a lot of things for a lot of response, and it certainly was true for animals. I got involved, and I'm sorry for the fuzzy picture there, but because of that, I got involved in creating a state animal response team. It was a nonprofit group that developed in Utah to help promote local preparedness for animals. And at the same time, I also got involved in NASAAEP, which is a national group. Sorry for the acronym, stands for National Alliance of State Animal and Agricultural Emergency Programs. That was an attempt to get veterinarians that were working on a state level for animal response all talking together. And it's more expansive than that, but that was the group that really needed to get together and start talking, and so it pulled in all those folks so that we could all be talking about the same things and looking for the same goals. In 2016, I moved to AVMA, became the disaster coordinator there, and am still there as far as I know. We'll see when I get back. So we're going to do just a little bit of poll participation here. So if you're interested in participating, we'll have maybe a couple of polls during this presentation. On your phone, text to number 22333, and to that number, text Warren Hess 538, 538. It's not case sensitive, so just Warren Hess 538. That'll activate you on the poll everywhere, anytime. Okay? And then we're just going to see what kind of interests we've got with this group here. Might just help me direct some of my talks. So once you get the little response back, then once I show the poll, you'll be able to type in A, B, C, D, hit send, and we hope if it all works right, we'll see what people have. So, okay, oh my goodness. What category best describes, now you guys don't have a business, so let's just talk about what your interest level at this point in your education is. Are you thinking small animal, mixed, large, mobile? Go mobile. I loved my mobile practice. Lab, people, government, others. Wow, we got a lot of others. Great. I don't know why the poll came up with already some numbers on it, unless you guys were too anxious in getting stuff in, but I thought I'd cleared it before I started this. Anyway, okay, great. We've got a lot of others who could be undecideds, or maybe we've got a number of people here that aren't in veterinary medicine per se and won't be going into any of these, so perfect. Okay, I want to talk about opportunities first off in disaster and disease response. And if I say disaster without saying disease with it, I always mean them both together because any of these responses have similarities to them. Whether it's a major disease occurrence that's happening, like avian influenza that happened, or it's happened numerous times, or whether it's a natural disaster, the response issues are all similar. So what do you need to know? I think the first thing you need to know is that you are receiving a great education that's going to make you a uniquely qualified subject matter expert when it comes to animal health. That's critical to know. You become a resource for whatever community you go to. And if you don't operate as a resource for that community, then you're missing out on a significant portion of assistance that you can provide to your community, above and beyond just what you can provide to individual animals. Okay? Veterinarians need to reach out to local emergency managers in the areas in which you work and offer your assistance and expertise and how to plug the veterinary community into the emergency management community. Same on local and regional and state levels. These groups all need to reach out to each other and form these associations. Very critical. And then also, anytime you're dealing with an animal response, we've got to keep in mind that there are certain laws and statutes that regulate who oversees the animals when it's not a individual owner bringing an animal to you as an individual veterinarian. If we're talking about animal response and we've got a bunch of loose animals, who is it that has that authority in the area to be overseeing those animals? So you've got to involve that jurisdictional authority, which in most cases is animal control people that are that have that authority and that oversight. So you might be saying, okay, but every time a disaster happens, my phone will not stop ringing of veterinarians who call up and basically say, I've got a week vacation coming up and I'd like to go and help out at this disaster site. And the problem is if they're not trained and qualified to fit into a team that's already trained together, then they may end up being more of a hindrance than a help. And there's a lot of reasons for that, just not knowledge-wise, but preparedness-wise and how big of a footprint you're going to create trying to go in to help versus what you consume while you're there that could go to people who don't have homes anymore, that they might need those resources. So you're competing for resources. So a lot of times teams that come in need to be self-sustaining, which means they require no outside assistance for at least 72 hours and frequently much longer than that, but a minimum of 72 hours. You've got to go in, you've got to be able to have your own place to sleep, your own food, your own equipment and supplies to do whatever your function is you're doing, okay? And if you're an officially recognized team in your state, in other words, your state knows about who you are, they may even vouch for you or have you be one of their official responding agencies, that's great, and there's potential for being able to go to other states then and provide that same kind of assistance. So you can see the level that you've got to work through before you can say, I want to go from one state to another state and get involved in this disaster response, if you're going to do it in an appropriate manner. So because of this need to have this system in place, AVMA is looking at, as we see the fingers crossed here, a hopeful initiative that will get worked through the bureaucracy at AVMA and some other national organizations. We're hoping to be able to have a veterinary responder certificate program that would be available. And what that would do would be establish core competencies that would be required. This would be a volunteer certificate. So when I say required for the certificate, for an entry-level veterinary responder, what's the minimum knowledge base that somebody should have before they jump into this area? We want to establish those and start teaching at least those things so you don't have any great deficits if you try to get involved. Hopefully it would become a national standard, although it would be voluntary. It would allow colleges of veterinary medicine or schools of veterinary medicine, in addition to other organizations, to teach to those core competencies. And if that program was recognized by AVMA, then that program would be qualified for the certificate or for the portion of the certificate they can teach. They may not be able to teach the whole thing. We'd maintain a database of those individuals. Again, USDA, disaster response team, state officials could all access that database and verify that the individuals had completed those trainings. And one of the critical aspects, again, I'll reinforce, is that part of this core competency is to assure that the holder of that certificate understands how they integrate into a response situation, into a local, regional, national, state, and national level. And it's more than just a few veterinarians getting together and making some decisions. You've got to play with the appropriate other groups and understand that you are not the top dog in these disaster responses. You are fulfilling a role in them. Many veterinarians are extremely independent and they want to go in and run the whole show, and that's generally not what happens. And then hopefully eventually as this certificate program gets going over the years, and it will be available for graduated veterinarians. So you might be saying, hey, great, but if this doesn't get going before I graduate, what happens? We anticipate it being available for graduated veterinarians as well, and to create hopefully a career path for veterinarians that are interested in this. It would actually spur more interest and provide state leaders more understanding of positions that could be filled by veterinarians that could be helpful in these roles in the future. So that is what we're hoping for. Aside from all that potential that may be coming down the road, how can you get involved now? Well, there's a number of ways you can get involved. I'm sorry I don't have the right state up here, but you can get involved in state veterinary medical reserve corps teams, or what are called VMRCs. You can get involved in state agricultural animal response teams. These are teams that might have a slightly different focus, but they all are involved in an animal response of one sort or another. Some colleges have their own response teams, and that's an avenue. There is a national veterinary response team, what's called NVRT. That team, unfortunately, hasn't been very active over the last few years. They are making an attempt to get that realigned and hopefully be more responsive, but right now it's available. It's an entity, I should say. I don't believe they're taking any applications at the moment, but it is an entity that still exists. There's also what's called NAHERC. It's the National Animal Health Emergency Response Corps. This is a group that is a group that signed up that could be activated. Mostly responds to disease events. They don't respond to disaster events. And then there's non-governmental organizations, NGOs. I think some of you may have had some encounter with ASPCA and other groups that actually do take veterinarians as part of their teams. And so that's one way in which a veterinarian can get involved, but you can also have a complete team that's just a veterinary response team that has a slightly different focus than a team that includes a veterinarian on it. So a question frequently comes up, do I need to be licensed to provide assistance in another state? There's no easy answer to this. And I think the bottom line, what I'd like to help you understand is we don't want to be making this decision last minute. Okay, there's a disaster now that's happening in Florida. What do I do about if I want to go there now? What do I do about a license? If you're working with a team that's training and so on, those decisions should be made far in advance, and any potential collaboration with another state would be better understood. It wouldn't be a last-minute decision. So I think if we take that view, we get away from the last-minute, I need to run quickly to this other state. So I think that's the ultimate answer. There are some shorter-term answers or some shorter-sighted answers, I guess. And let me just mention real quickly, there are federal teams I mentioned. Those federal teams generally have reciprocity written into state laws. So if you're a federal responder and you're acting in that federal role, you don't have to worry about being licensed. Governors have the ability to institute rules during emergencies that can alter a license situation, and there's a couple of different methods to do that. We don't have time to talk about that, But that can happen as well. That can be an avenue for a team to get plugged in to say, if a governor's declared an emergency, then we're part of this exchange that's going on. Our team goes in with the understanding ahead of time and everything in place that as long as we're working in our response roles, our licenses are reciprocated in that situation. There's also laws that can be written and are written in many state practice acts which govern how veterinarians are to practice in that state that have allowances for things like emergency or limited or temporary license permits that can be done. And we've seen in some recent disasters, certain states, specifically Texas and Florida, who made available those temporary licenses that veterinarians could apply for and get usually within 24 hours. So that's another avenue. Another frequent question that comes up is, would I get paid if I go do this? Or how's that going to work? Another big question. It depends. Right now, frequently, in most cases, you would not get paid. It would be a volunteer position, but there are exceptions to that. If you are put onto a federal team, you generally are getting paid some kind of a wage because you are activated as a federal team. And there are also certain NGO teams that would provide either some compensation for travel, things like that, or maybe even some salary, depending on the organization and what capabilities they've got at the moment. So what paid positions are available in veterinary disaster medicine? Well, state boards or state departments of agriculture, like where I went to work, in some states they're called state boards of animal health. That all just depends on under whose jurisdiction that office is operating under. In the State Department of Agriculture, they're under the governor and that kind of a system. In states where it's a State Board of Animal Health, they are under a livestock board, and they're overseen by that method. So thus the difference in nomenclature. There are military roles that can be done. There are federal government roles, and USA Jobs is the federal government's job application site. You can always search that for veterinarians, and there are a number of different jobs at the federal government level that are involved in one way or another with disease and disaster response. Non-governmental organizations are also available. So I talked about this basic core competency level that needs to happen. And part of that is going to be mentioned here in the next few slides, but also where do you get this kind of training? So you got to learn to play in the sandbox. Some of the folks in the disaster club probably are going to be familiar with a little bit of this, but FEMA has some training through their Emergency Management Institute, or what's called EMI. These are both available online for some of their courses. Some of the courses have to be done in person. But there are some basics that should be done in order to respond so that you understand how you're fitting into a system that involves more than just my veterinary team, okay? And these are called IS courses. These are available on the internet and can be done online. Those are critical. Some others that could be considered would be the IS 7 and 800. These are a more involved understanding of the National Incident Management System and the National Response Framework and how that goes. But at a minimum, I would say the first two, IS 100 and 200s, should be considered. There are some courses that EMI offers that are specific for animals in disasters. And I think those would be very beneficial to take too. So be aware, you can look for those. You can go to their website, just go to FEMA.gov, type in EMI courses and animals or veterinarians and see what comes up. But I think these are really good to be aware of what's being taught to other people in addition to just veterinarians. What are other responders being taught? Other resources, I'm going to tout the National Alliance of State Animal and Agricultural Emergency Programs that I mentioned earlier. They provide a lot of great resources. You can become a member for $25 a year for that organization and be plugged into the information that they do. They do monthly webinars, which are generally recorded, so if you can't see them at the time they're live, you can go back and view them later. A lot of great summaries on disasters and responses that happened. AVMA has a veterinary business continuity of operations planning. Big long name that means if you're in practice, what should you be doing in your practice to make sure that you are ready for a disaster? If your family, you as an individual, your family and your clinic aren't prepared, you can't be a resource for anybody else if you're dealing with your own issues, because there was something you could have done that you didn't that would have made you better prepared. You can't prepare for everything, but there's a lot that you can. We might have a few minutes to even talk about some of that. There's some regional alliance groups that are available that are multiple state organizations that work together as well, and they provide training. There are state groups. I think some of you get exposed to that here with some of the smart individuals that serve on that come in and do some training. And then just to make you aware, there's also foreign animal disease training that goes far beyond what you ever receive in school. And there are certain practitioners that are able to get this training, and they become official disease responders. And by official, I mean there's somebody that USDA APHIS recognizes that can be sent out to be the point person on a potential foreign animal disease incident. And a private practitioner may be the first one that encounters something that they might become suspicious of, but once they report that, you've got to have an official foreign animal disease diagnostician that is the point person that goes out to handle that situation on the ground until a response can be pulled together. And so that's some additional training that is available for certain individuals, typically government veterinarians, but there are opportunities for private practitioners to do that as well. And with the new diagnostic lab that's going in Kansas, they anticipate they're going to have the ability to teach many more veterinarians this FADD course than they have in the past. There's also FAD courses which don't make you the foreign animal disease diagnostician. They just are preparatory courses for that more extensive course. So just a brief mention of that. There's also other groups, great groups out there that can provide training, and they have expertise in different areas that can really be helpful, whether it's in sheltering of animals, whether it's in the actual rescue of animals, things like that go on and can be very beneficial as well. So once you're graduated and out there in practice, what about educating your clientele? I think it's really helpful if, as a veterinarian, you can help your clientele help them understand the importance of being ready. What are some things that you can do? Because they expect you to be the expert on this. So you could offer disaster preparedness classes to your clients with the technology. I mean, back in my day, I used to laugh at the professors and so on that used to say back in my day when I was in school, but now I can say that with you guys. When I was in practice, we would actually hold these types of classes in our clinic. We'd invite people in. We had a waiting room that was situated such that we could fit quite a few people in there, and we would hold classes right in the clinic. Today, with the ability to do stuff online and even record it, you can interact with your clientele in many different ways and provide that. So those are some available things. I'm not a big fan of pre-manufactured emergency kits for animals just because I think they cost a lot of money for what they have in them and they may not have what you need in them. But you can provide those or provide resources for them, or at least provide your clientele with some good lists. And there are a number of organizations that have recommended lists. AVMA, we've got one, depending on the type of animal, that you can teach your clientele that they should maintain those emergency kits for their animals just like they do for their other family members. There's also community organizations that are called CERT teams. These are Community Emergency Response Teams. These were put together for the human side of a response, so they could be people who could lend a helping hand and they understood what they were doing in an emergency, that have been trained to do that. You'll frequently see them with green helmets on, and green vests are the typical color they'll be in. But they have animal modules that have been available for those members to be taught. You could offer to teach those animal modules to the CERT members in your locality. That'd be a great way to be a benefit to them. You could also take donations. Facilities that do donations, I think for sometimes from a consumer standpoint, it can be really bothersome. But I think depending on what the organization is that you're trying to help, I think there's a lot of people who appreciate the fact that you're really concerned. And especially if you align yourself with some group that can utilize funding during a disaster event, it can be really remarkable how many of your clients will respond and really appreciate that effort if there is some significant national or international event going on, or even a state event, and you are providing a way for them to help to donate to that effort that's going on. So it can be done by jars or checkout donations, anything like that. So I've got just a few minutes left. I'm going to run through a few ideas on this. How do you prepare your business? When you get out there, what should you be doing? I want to just give you an experience of Stubner Airline Veterinary Hospital in Spring, Texas in August of 2017. Had a big Hurricane Harvey down there. And despite the fact that they were very far away from any water, you see what happened to their clinic in that picture. They were on their main floor. They were up 5-6 feet on that main floor of their clinic, just completely inundated with water. They had to rescue their animals out of the clinic on boats. You can see the outdoor runs there that are covered completely. How do you prepare for stuff like this? And what can you do to mitigate the problem? The thing that's interesting about this is that they were out of business for 4 months. How would your practice do if you were out of business for 4 months? You couldn't practice. Have you put anything in place? You know, we don't have time to talk about that. But as I mentioned earlier, you've got to be prepared, number one. Okay? Personal plan. If you're not prepared as an individual, then you can't be prepared for your family members. You can't be prepared for your clinic staff. You can't be prepared for your community either. So get a plan, practice it. Practice doesn't make perfect, but it does help to make it permanent in your mindset. I already mentioned the community emergency response teams, the CERT teams that are available, but you know what else is available? There are community animal response teams that are formed in some locations, and they are specifically animal focused. It's so interesting to see how many people that have been trained in the CERT system, the human system, that would much rather be involved in the CART system or the community animal response team. It's a great resource and something else that you can do. You know, Dwight D. Eisenhower said, a famous quote of his for saying, "In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." How can that be? How can plans be useless but planning be indispensable? Well, I think what that means is that even though we have to write plans down so that we understand them as we put them together, during an event, it's very rare that we're going to go pull that plan off the shelf and open the pages and start reading it. But what we've done in preparation to put that book on the shelf with all of the information in it is indispensable in helping us understand the connections, the people we should be communicating with, and what kind of a process we're going to go through. And I think that's what Dwight D. Eisenhower also meant in preparing for war, that once the battle starts, the plan, don't pull it off the shelf. It's not going to do you any good. But all the preparation you did for that helps you deal with all the unexpected turns and twists that occur. So, with that in mind, one more poll here. Let's just see where you guys are at. Which of the following most accurately describes you? A, you've written a personal or family emergency plan and practice it regularly. B, I've written a personal family emergency plan but don't really practice it. C, I've discussed it or thought about it but haven't written it or practiced it. D, I've discussed it and thought about it but it's not written. E, I know I should develop a personal family plan, but haven't done it yet. And F, I agree with Eisenhower, plans are useless, thus I haven't bothered. So this is a pretty typical level of response that we see. And believe me, if you have a real intent to be involved as a responder, in whatever way, you have got to be ready yourself, especially if we're talking about natural disasters. Really critical. So just keep that in mind. Something that everybody struggles with. So above and beyond being prepared individually, why is it important? And we'll probably just have enough time to wind up on this why bit. Why should you even consider putting in the effort to have some kind of a preparedness plan for your practice or for your business? Well, some things to consider. And this is data for just businesses in general. I think, to be honest with you, veterinary business are more resilient than many other businesses. But I think the point will get across here. After a major natural disaster, what happens? What we see is that 43% of businesses never reopen after a major natural disaster. About 16% will reopen, but they'll only make it for a couple of years. And then the other 40% will make it. So you can see there's a significant problem here if you don't have some kind of a plan in place and you're just walloped with a major natural disaster. There's a real possibility, and a lot of businesses do go out of business with those and never do reopen. Okay? What about for major fires? We don't have time to talk about all the different types of events that could impact your practice, but these will give you a couple thoughts. What about major fires? Well, for a major fire, major structural fire, which significantly damages your building and your resources, 30% fail within 1 year. 40% will fail within 3 years because of that experience, and then 30% will remain open, but just because they remain open doesn't mean that they weren't severely impacted by it. Okay? How about something as simple as backing up your data? I wish I had time to tell you about the experience I had after my burn accident, getting back into practice, and the first thing they wanted me to do was help with their computer system, because I'd always been involved with computers ever since my college years, and they'd been backing up for a couple of years and actually were not backing anything up on their backup tapes at the time. So what if you lost your backup data? Or I'm sorry, this is a view of what organizations out there do. 34% of them have never backed up data. 50% of them have backed up something, but it's not what they need, okay? And only 16% had actual good information. The stuff that they needed was what they were saving and had ready access to. So some crazy things to think about and numbers that are out there. How about if you just lose that data for 10 days or longer? This is where specifically I think veterinary offices would be more resilient. 50% of businesses, if they lost their data for 10 days or longer, would go bankrupt immediately. 43% would go bankrupt within a year, and only a small percent would stay in business if you lost your data for 10 days. So that means that maybe you've got a corrupted drive and that's the only way you're going to get it, and it's going to take some company tens of thousands of dollars and 3 to 4 months to recover some of your data off of that. That can be devastating for a lot of practices. So data backup, something to consider. Don't think we've got time to go into how we go about all of this and what's involved in doing it, but I want you to be aware that on the AVMA webpage, there are resources out there for much of what I've talked about. We'll be having some online courses that will be available for this business continuity that's going to be out there on our new AVMA Axon website. That's our Axon is our new digital education platform that you can take courses on and keep track of what you've taken, and if there's a certificate program for something, get certified and things that way. So that's all I've got time for. I've got maybe time for one or two quick questions if anybody has got a burning issue they want answered, like, yes, real quick here.
Have there been any surveys or maybe even just speculation on the factors that may or may not be related to why certain practices fail, why certain practices stay open after 50 days?
So the question is, have there been surveys or studies done to indicate in some of these numbers I've shown you in different incidences of why they fail or why they go out of business due to a certain incident? What was it with that caused that to happen? No, that more detailed information is not available. But I think just the way veterinary clinics tend to run, and because you're not necessarily much of a financial institution, you can typically run with lost health records for a period of time, which I think makes you more resilient. You can rebuild a lot of stuff you need to on the go, but it's a lot of work and a lot of hassle, and you're going to lose a lot of revenue by having to go through those. So. Okay, I've got to run to get to the next town. Appreciate the opportunity, and I've made this presentation available. There's some stuff we didn't get through that's on there also. If it gets distributed to you electronically, it's in a PDF format. It'll show you some of the resources that AVMA has out there, and thank you and good luck, and I hope we've spurred some interest in a few of you anyway.